I'm just going to go through. There were a couple files that were very easy to comment on what needs to be fixed. Can anyone tell me what needs to be fixed with this submission?
Turn off the controller.
Showing.
Yeah. So who do we have here? So Chen, make sure, sorry, Alex, make sure you go and turn off the control curves as well as the grid. Okay, so turn off the NURBS curves when you play Blast, please. Okay? And
okay.
Was there another one? Is this?
Yeah, I submitted two. So.
Oh, good. Okay, yay. As long as you caught that. Great job. That's great. And then there was another one over here. Ah, okay. So this one here. Who do we have here? So David. So I think timing wise, if you look at the length of your shot, right, you can see it's taking way too many frames. So it's very slow and very floaty. And then if you look at the pixel dimensions, I know up here, it reads 1280 by 720, but that's the render resolution. So if we were rendering, we would get that. But the actual pixel dimensions are 512 by 512. So you need to make that 1280 by 720. Okay. And here, I think the timing is just way off. I think we were using about 12 frames for the first bounce. It's also moving in a straight line. So you got to put things back on arcs. So make sure arcs, right? So make sure things are moving on an arc, and then also check the timing. So I think we were starting with something like 12 frames to fall, and then it was like 8 frames up and 8 frames down, right? So we did 8 frames up, 8 frames down, and then the last bounce we were doing something like 4 and 4 on the other side. So right now you can see the total number of frames, right? You're hitting about 4 seconds, right? Almost 5 seconds just to clear. So it's way too many frames. So it's just taking way too long. Okay. Other issues that I see, the ball is not speeding up. It's not accelerating as it gets to the ground, and it's starting to squash before it hits the ground. So you can see that it's a circle, and then it starts to drift back into an oval, and then it holds. And if you count how many frames it holds, right, it hits the ground 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's almost over half a second. So it's just way too long. It should just be like 2 or 3 frames to go from stretch to squash to stretch again to go back up. Okay. So the big issue is timing. Then the other issue as well is the height of the bounces should get less and less. This feels about the same. There's a bit of a wiggle here in the path. So use a motion trail. So make sure you use motion trails so you can see the path that you've got in your scene, and then you'll be able to see if there's any problems. It'll usually show up in the trail. You'll see bumps and wiggles. Then you'll be able to go in and say, oh, why is that? What's going on there? And then you can go to the graph editor and fix it. Okay.
How do you do motion trail?
That's in the visualize menu. So in Maya, you go to visualize. Sorry, it's an S. Visualize, and then it's editable motion trail. Right. So it's in the visualize menu in Maya.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then this one.
Fix it and submit.
Yep. Same submission. So same issues. Ah, this one. Who is this? Danette. This is not the shot camera. Right. So it's the perspective view. So make sure you go back to the shot camera. Just go back to the shot camera and then export your play blast from there. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So it should say this. Is this yours as well? No, it's Diego. Okay. Okay. And then this one. That's interesting. So this one, it's 1280. So Dylan, the only thing I don't see, let me just move this around. I don't see the shot cam. So I'm not sure if the gate has changed. So if you look at how this dimensions has changed. So I would double check and see what your export settings are just to make sure. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Now that one. So what I'm seeing is a bit of even spacing. Let's see over here, Hokun. So if we sort of look at the direction, so if you just sort of track the center frame by frame, right in here especially, it's very even, right? So this and this and this, very evenly spaced. So this is correct, you have bigger spacing here. This makes it feel like we're being pulled this way, right? But this tells me we're going this way. So the stretch is fighting the direction that we're going. So I would make sure you sort of angle that in the direction you're coming from. and then have a look at those positions. The arc feels a bit linear, especially up over here. The path, it feels like the parabola is a bit like a rounded triangle. So I would try to round it out a little bit more. Okay. And then do pay attention here. You really get the sense that there's kind of an unevenness to the parabola. So it travels a bigger distance, there's a bit of a hook, and it kind of has a corner feeling to it. Same note over here. It feels a little bit sluggish as it falls. It feels like the spacing isn't getting big enough before we hit the ground. It feels a bit even. And I think the squash and stretch, right? So the stretch that you're doing here, I would probably have this stretch and then go to a squash, but try to make it feel like it's hitting the ground, right? So the idea is that the squash would happen out this way. But right now, when you look at that pose, if I clear that, it feels a little bit like it's being squashed in this direction as opposed to being parallel to the ground out like that. Okay?
Okay.
And when you have a big change like this, this feels like a different sized ball. So I think it's distorted a bit too much, right? So it's just pushing a little too far, especially with a shorter bounce. It's hard to get away with that much change in shape. Okay. The other thing to add into here is I don't see the ball spinning, right? So it should be rotating. So make sure you have the ball spinning, right? I can see it kind of back spins a little bit there, but it should be rotating this way. Make sense? I hope. That one's looking okay. That's a big stretch. So I think what I would do here is just avoid maybe stretching it this far. It does create sort of a straight line. So what I might do is maybe angle that up a little bit more like this. So you get a bit more of an arc. Whose is this that I'm commenting on? Israel. So just to get a little bit more of an arc on the way up. Same thing on the way down. It does feel a little bit linear. I would try to round that out at the top a little. And then that last bounce. So I just got to hide the gallery here. That last bounce does feel a little bit soft. So if you look at how you're hitting the ground, this is where you hit the ground and this is just before. So there's not a really big contrast, right? So the spacing is a bit even when you go frame by frame and track. It's kind of similar. So just want to make sure that that last position, right? If we're looking from the high point and we're going towards here, what I would look at is, okay, if that's track the middle, that's where I am and that's where I start, I'm up over here, then I would go the next frame behind and I would really move this up really big. So that the biggest distance is just before you hit the ground, right? So you have this big gap and then everything else, you can just let the computer kind of cut that up into smaller and smaller pieces. That's looking okay. Did the aspect ratio snap again? Double check. Let's see, whose is this? So Gian, just check and see. I don't know why the aspect ratio is changing. That's 1280 by 720 and that's 1280 by 720. So it could be that maybe the gate mask, just make sure the gate mask is on, okay? Just wondering why that size changes there. Ah, another Jimmy. So this is the perspective view. Make sure you switch over to the shot cam. So you need to re-export, okay? Make sure you switch to the shot camera and then export. Yeah, looking okay. So nice big gap in spacing. That's nice, creates a good bounce. I think the exit here feels a bit linear. It feels a bit like a straight line, right? So if you kind of look at the center points, it's a bit straight, right? And you can really feel there's a point where we kind of, it feels just a bit linear. So it feels a little bit like a corner up here. So try to arc that up as much as you can on the exit. Where are we here? That was Jimmy. Here, I think this just feels a bit flat. So it feels like it's kind of running along a plateau and then it goes down. So just try and, again, get that position and track towards wherever you're going to impact, okay? And here, I would not stretch here and here. I would just have one. So what I might do is just get rid of that pose. This is a nice big distance here from here to here. So you can just go straight from here. And then you get a nice squash happening. That would make it feel a little better. And then watch out here because it feels like we're sliding. So if I look at the contact point, right, where that center goes, we slide. So you would want to move this over so that that point and that point match up. So you just need to reposition the ball to be centered around that contact point, right? And then the same thing with the stretch. Make sure that feels like it's coming off of the same point on the ground. This does feel a bit linear. Now here you have this stretch pose. Just do that for one frame. And then this should now be a circle. Okay, and in terms of the spacing, if you look at the leading edge, that's pretty close. So it feels like we're slowing down, looking at the top edge. And then all of a sudden we click up. So using that stretch control changes the way you perceive the spacing. So even though the graph might not look like there's anything wrong, I think the big issue is just making sure you just have one frame of stretch and then go back to a circle. Then you'll be able to judge the spacing a little more accurately. Same thing here, it's drifting. I think there's too much stretch going on, so it feels like it's just, you know, a blob. Only use it for motion blur, so just like the frame before you hit the ground. And I think I would probably tone it down a little bit, that last bounce in particular. I would probably, you know, here you're stretching more after the impact. I would just go from here and say, there's my squash, there's my stretch, and then I'm back to being a circle. Okay. That's not bad. I think the stretch control is getting turned on a little early. So again, we're drifting. So save that for when you need it. And I think from here to here, it's very little change. I would put this right down and maybe even have it actually touching the ground and leading into that squash position. And the same thing here. And then go back to being a circle, right? So it's just drifting too long, all right? Okay, whose assignment is this? Caitlin. So watch that squash and stretch control. Keep it locked as a circle for as long as possible, and just one frame. That's all we need, just a stretch and a squash. Hello, sorry?
It's just too much stretch.
Yeah, so it's just drifting. So if you look here, frame 26, it seems to be a circle. And then it's 1, 2, 3. We have 3 frames of stretch, right? So it's just drifting. So what you would want to do is make sure that the squash and stretch control, you just use it right here, just before you hit the squash. Okay. And the same thing here, right? Just, oops, as you drift out of this, stretch, and then back to being a circle. Boing, snap back to shape. Ah, oops. What we got here? Martin, this is not the shot camera.
Yeah, I tried fixing it with the shot camera, but apparently the camera was not giving me enough angle. I tried to work around with perspective, but if that's an inconvenience, I can work it again.
So what was the problem with the shot camera?
Like there was a bit much of a zoom, and I was not getting a clear picture at the bouncing and stretching.
Okay, because it should work. I mean, that's the way we set up the assignment. It should be okay. Maybe it's the height, right? So I think you just moved this up a bit too high. So what you could do is just go in the graph editor and just find the translate Y and just scale the whole curve down. So you just bring the bounce to a lower position and then it should work.
I'll work on that.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
How much time? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. How much time do we have for resubmit it?
Resubmit, just get it in by today so Flora knows before she starts grading them, okay? Okay, so here, and the spacing is a bit even. So if you look in this area, right? So it's really there, 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 there. So it makes it feel a bit flat, right? It doesn't accelerate as much as it could, right? And then over here, we have kind of an asymmetric. The parabola kind of swings over this way, and then it goes down this way, this way. So if you kind of connect those two, it feels a little asymmetric. Okay, so try to get that parabola to feel the same, right? A little more symmetric on either side of the high point. And then here, it feels like it gets more energy. This last bounce feels like it really gets pushed up. And I'm assuming this would be off screen, right? That's where you stopped right there. So that feels like we're getting a bit of a kick, right? And then over here, going this way, it feels like we slow down. So this is what you would animate if the ball was going into a strong headwind, right? So if there's really strong headwind that was pushing on this, then you wouldn't get a parabola that's symmetric. It would definitely be skewed more like this, okay? But this, if you look at how far we're traveling in this direction, right? That tells us the speed, right? So just imagine this speed, whatever it is, you know, if it's 5 kilometers an hour, whatever it is. Then when you go here, the spacing really changes. So you're traveling much bigger distances going horizontally compared to here. So it feels like something hit the ball, right? All of a sudden it got accelerated. So keep an eye on that. And that would be if this direction is the translate Z, that's what you'd be looking at. Is you'd be looking in the graph, you might see something like, oh, well, like this is the left side of screen, and then I'm heading towards the right side of screen. And it should be a straight line for the translate Z or X, whatever that direction is. But if it changes speed, if you have one curve or set of points, which is like this, and then that last bounce, you have this, that's going to be a big change in speed, because as soon as you change the slope of the line, it means the speeds are very, very different. If they're similar, you may not notice it, but here we really notice a big kick. Okay. That's looking good. No major complaints. Spin, stretch, squash, stretch, up in the air. Yep, nice. I think this one, the trickiest part here is, again, because when you stretch the ball, right, it actually gains height here. And then if you look at the spacing, it feels like it really gets pushed up a bit more. So what I would do is lift this one up a little bit more, get it closer to this. Right, just because this one is changing the way your eye will think about the leading edge of it. So it feels like this needs to be up just a little bit more. So, yeah. Just watch the beginning. It's a bit flat, so it feels a bit like we're on sort of a solid surface here. Just round that out. Good. Is that the same one? Yeah, Sophia, part 2. Okay. Aha. And who's this one? Tom. Did you submit another one, Tom? No. So Tom, you know what you need to do here?
Yeah, I'm already doing that. So
okay, good. Yeah, just get rid of the nerves and then resubmit.
Okay, and that can go. I mean.
So on that, let's see, it's looking okay. One thing, watch out for the spin. So the spin control. What Maya will probably do, if you set a key at frame 1 and then like the last frame, I think that's what I did a demo of. You have like this, it's at 0 degrees, and then over here it's 360 degrees. The problem is that Maya will do this. It will connect a smooth curve through the points. And that means for the first little bit, it won't rotate very much. And then it will pick up speed. So it'll feel like something is spinning the wheels more. And then when you get to the end, it'll slow down. So the way to fix that is just to do a straight line so that now it's just constant. So if I look at the beginning, you can see the first few frames, you're barely rotating, and then it really kicks in, right? So all of a sudden we get this really strong acceleration and rotation going on. The other thing I can see is you're using 2 rotation objects. You're using the blue and you're using the red, which means you're getting double rotations. So what I would do is get rid of the blue rotation. No rotation on that control, and only use the red one. Okay? That'll make your life a lot easier, because when you move the blue one, it moves everything. It's the top node. It will move everything. So that means that you can't have as much control over the squash and stretch deformers, because they will be moved by the top parent. But if you use the red one, you can rotate the geo, but it doesn't rotate the squash and stretch deformers. So you don't have to fight that. Okay.
I see. So
yeah.
The first thing was like to make in the graph a straight line, right?
Yeah, and that would be for the red control. Okay. For blue control, use that only for translation. So you go to the blue control, go to all the rotations.
Yeah, I think I made it for mistake.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just learning how to work in a way that's smarter, right? Not harder. You can work this way, but then you have to counter animate the actions of the parent. So it's just a little easier to clean up if it's just one thing, right? Right now you have two things doing the rotation. So it's a lot more tricky to kind of, figure out why things are moving or why they're not moving the way you would expect. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then other things, again, watch out for the sliding. So you can see that the contact position, it drifts. So locking that down. And then over here, if you look at this part feels like it's a very different angle than this, right? So we're gonna have sort of like an asymmetric parabola. And even over here, you can see we have backspin, right? So all of a sudden the rotation goes the opposite way that we would predict, right? So it's going this way. And then right here, it hits a point and it starts to go back the other way just for a few frames. So you get a little backspin. This bounce here, the arc feels a little bit more like a triangle, feels a little bit pointy at the top. So you want to round that out a little bit. You can add some breakdowns. And again, watch out for the evenness of the spacing. It feels like we're kind of falling very evenly. Okay. That's looking okay. It's a bit of a big squash, but it works. So that's the only note would be just you could back that off a little bit and see how it feels, right? It's quite noticeable, very graphic. But in terms of like what you're doing, it's okay. Who is this? This is Wushik. So yeah, everything else is looking okay. Spacing seems good. We get nice acceleration in and out. Boing, boing. It's just toning down the squash a little bit. That's all.
Just squash just a little bit left.
Sorry, could you say that again?
So squash it just a little bit less.
Yeah, I would just tone down the squash. This just seems like a lot more material. This is just really big when you look at this, right? When you look at like the mass, the volume, right? So it's about how much can you preserve the volume. So if that feels like there's more stuff, all of a sudden it feels like the ball increased in size. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so just tone it down just a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's looking okay. This is Yusuke. Good. I think this one, you have to watch out for this. So this is always a trouble when you have like a shorter height. The problem is that with the stretch, it takes us to the same point. So it feels like it's actually hit a ceiling, right? That it can't go up anymore. So the solution to this would be less. You would just do less squash and less stretch and then be able to move up a little bit. Sorry, silly phone alarm is going on there. And then right here, there's a little bit of a spacing pop. So if you look at that, we just all of a sudden we vanish. So like, the thing's gone that far. So it just feels like it got hooked and pulled off screen just a little quickly. Okay. So right here, there's a bit of a spacing issue. So I would just try to do less squash and less stretch so you don't move up as much, right? You could even experiment and say, well, since this is such a short bounce, maybe I won't do any. I'll do no squash and no stretch. So you could make it a little sharper so it doesn't have more time on the ground. And you could just get rid of this frame and just go up in the air. And that might be a lot easier than trying to fit in the squash and stretch. Sometimes there just isn't enough frames to put it in there in a way that works as well when you have more time. Okay. All right. And David already gave feedback as another one. Okay. What's this one? Alejandro. Looking good. Again, I just think that maybe this is just a bit too much, right? So I would just tone that down, just try it less, just because this seems like a different amount of stuff than that, right? Just feels like it's just grown too much. And do pay attention to the contact point, the middle. So you probably have to shift that over a little. Over here, I would just check the spacing. It feels a bit even when you start getting sort of to this point here. I would probably, you can see it's starting to stretch. So I would say, no stretch. Keep it a circle until you get to just before the landing. So if you have a squash position, then the frame before, that would be your stretch pose. And I would probably tone those down quite a bit for that last bounce, just like I was showing in the previous example. Okay. last but not least, oh, Alejandro's is number 2. Sorry, I didn't know there was another one. That looks a little better. Still stretching a bit early. So just watch the stretch control against the last bounce, right? So you're squashing a bit early and stretching a bit early. Just adjust the timing of that and lock it down a little more. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's everybody. I see the chat going on. Did anybody resubmit one that I have to go grab, Flora?
I resubmit mine. I just want to know if it's okay now.
Ah, okay.
Freaking microphone keeps lowering.
Oh
my
no,
volume.
like
But
it
anyway,
automatically
yeah, a
drops?
couple people
Okay.
resubmitted and they're asking if they can if you can check it again.
Okay,
Please.
so let's see. So that was Danette, correct?
Yep, I think it's Danette.
Yeah.
Dylan and Diego. I think you skipped Diego.
Oh, did I? Sorry, Diego. Where was it? Let's see. Okay, so there was Danette. Let's see.
I resubmitted mine too.
Okay, so that should be, yep, today's. Okay, there's Danette. And let's just go by date. I guess that would make it easier. Jimmy.
I resubmitted mine and it is H264, so I'm confused on why it's not showing still.
Weird. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And there. Oh, that was from this morning. Okay, so that must be it.
Just to ask, what were the dimensions again? 720 by 1280, right?
1280 by 720. So the width 1280 and the height 720. Okay, and Diego, I wonder why we skipped over yours. Okay. Okay. Okay, Danette. Ah, that looks good. Boing, boing. Yeah, not bad. I think just in here, there's a little bit of a part where just in this area, it feels just a little evenly spaced. And then you have, this is good. So you have like a nice big change, right? So you get a really strong acceleration. But just up in here, it feels just a little bit even. So I would just probably go in the graph editor and see what's going on there and see if there's a reason why it's sort of the distance per frame in height seems kind of similar. It's a bit even, right? So what you're looking for is when you have a curve, right, is the part of it that matches a straight line. So if that's very long, right, a lot of frames are like that, it will feel flat. So what you try to do is look at that area and say, well, what could I do? And the only thing you could try to do is sort of make that a very short area where it feels like a straight line, okay? So everywhere along here, if you were to kind of draw tangents along here, you would have different slopes. So you'd know you'd have a much more, you know, dramatic acceleration. Okay, there we go. Go back up. Again, watch the, I would probably look.
Fred, just to let you know, I resubmitted back into a folder with the appropriate changes. You let me know.
Okay, sure, thank you. And I would try, this feels a little bit off. I would try to just move that over just a little bit, just to keep going up to the top. Check the angle of the parabola here. This one feels a little bit sharper than this one. So it feels kind of like this. All right, so it seems like just a little bit of asymmetry there. And one way to check that, again, is you go here and this distance here, right, if that's the translate Z or X, whatever it is, then you just look from whatever frame this is, where I'm leaving the ground, you find that one there, and then you find the frame where you're hitting the ground, that one, and that should be a straight line, just a straight line. And then what that will do is it will cut things exactly in half, and that means that the middle of your animation will be the high point. It'll fix it for you. Okay, Danette?
Yep, thank you.
All right, and that last squash and stretch, again, you can see we roll, right? So we slide over. You could probably get away with less squash for this one, just because it's a shorter bounce. It's a pretty minor thing. Okay, Jimmy.
Thanks.
No problem. Boing, boing. And I think it's that last bounce. It feels like it sticks to the floor a little too long. So because a short bounce, I really notice it sticking to the ground before it leaves. That one is more noticeable because the positions are closer together. So I think you have this nice gap right from here to here. So you make sure that's just a circle. It feels like we are distorting the ball a bit early. So just check this should still be a circle. Then you have your stretch pose, squash pose, and then the stretch pose. So what you might want to do is you could try getting rid of one of these and see how it feels. I think what I might do here is do like a stretch, squash, and then instead of having this one on the ground, I would probably just go here and maybe just adjust that a little bit just to kind of get that impact to have a little bit more energy. Just because we have, again, we think about, you have like 1, 2, 3 frames on the ground, and then you have 1, 2, 3 frames to get off of screen. So that chunk of time is just the same as that bounce. So it seems a little bit slower because the positions are all a lot closer together than the ones over here where we travel a much bigger distance. We have more time to kind of spread out the movement. Okay, Jamie?
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Dylan?
I resubmitted mine too.
Okay. This last bounce, this one feels a bit kind of like the pyramid is a bit rounded.
Yeah.
So you need to just work on that. It's a bit evenly spaced in here as well.
Okay.
Very even. So it just feels like a straight line just before you hit the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think here you could probably get away with a bit more contrast. Right. So what I'd probably just get rid of this position, have this one,
Mhm.
and use that one to be like, okay, there's my stretch, then my squash, and then use that as a stretch to jump out.
Right. So just like take everything back one
Yeah, a
frame
little bit.
essentially.
Yeah. And the amount of squash and stretch I'm drawing, but I don't know if that's going to work. I think that's a bit excessive. You probably want to tone it down for that last bounce to get off screen.
Okay.
All right. Yep. 10. Okay, so that's good from the shot cam. Very good. Watch the contact point. So here again, the stretch, it feels like it's being stretched in this direction, and it should be stretched in the direction we're coming from. And then the same thing with the squash. Oops. Look at the contact point, and that should anchor this, right? It's sliding. And then go back up. So just watch those contact points. Same thing here. There's a bit of an arc issue. We kind of jump out this way and then go down. All right, so we have from here to here, there, there. So just look at the motion trail when you put it on there. A little bit of erratic motion there. Okay? Just a little bit of a wobble. And Diego. Yeah, it's looking good. I think just that last bounce, again, same issue. You have 1, 2, 3 frames. You might try and adjust that. Maybe just have 2 frames just so it doesn't stick to the ground as much and it keeps going. But really minor, it's working. It's just something to experiment with. Okay, and was there anyone else? I think it was Israel who mentioned.
Yeah, it's
submitted?
Israel, and I think you missed Ivan as well.
Okay.
And me as well.
Okay.
Oh, and Martin.
Okay. Israel and Martin, right? Hopefully that's
And
everybody.
Ivan. I think you missed them.
Yvonne?
Yep.
Where are they? Ah, there. Okay. All right. I think what I might do here, the speed of this one, it feels like it slows down a little bit. So if you look at like the distance you're going here to here, and then here, it starts to feel like we slow down. So that's fast, that's slow, and that's going in this direction. So just making sure it's a straight line in the translate X or Z, that'll help. What I might do for the first one is I might lift this up a little bit more just to get a bit more height. So then I want a little bit stronger arc. This feels a bit shallow. And then here you have this big, really big shift horizontally. So if you look at sort of that distance, that's how far you're going in one frame. And then look at the next one. Right, so something is pushing against the ball and slowing it down. So just watch that T, X, and Z. A little bit of a contact slide. Right, so I think I'd probably just have one contact and not like this. These are too similar. So you could probably get away with like a stretch, then a squash, and then a stretch again. But this feels like it actually rolls on the floor a little bit before bouncing up. Okay.
Got it.
That arc seems a little bit different than this one. So it feels like a little bit of a asymmetric slope. So yeah, little stuff like that to fix. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And another thing to check too is the rotation. If you look in here, the rotation speed you have here is very different than over here. So again, I would just start with like frame 1, it's 0 degrees. And then the last frame, I think it was what, -360. And then just make sure that's a straight line from the first frame to the last frame, just to keep the spin going at about the same rate. Okay. And that was Israel. Martin. Okay. So here, Martin, the timing. So if you have like, there's nothing on frame 1, we should see the ball, frame 1. And then it's taking you 6 frames. 24 divided by 6 equals what? Someone tell me. That's like 1/4 of a second, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's very quick, right? So the timing there needs to be adjusted. So that would be double. So instead of 6, I would say try 12 frames, right? So that would give you a better sense of timing. This is a complete straight line, right? So we don't have an arc. So you got to work with the arcs there. And then here, it's having a little squash and stretch party up here.
Yeah, it probably must have not saved correctly the keyframe when I tried to export it on the play last.
Okay. So yeah,
I'm
look
looking at
those.
it right now,
Yeah.
just to be clear on that.
Cool.
Just one.
So line those up to match with the landings, okay?
All right.
Another suggestion would be here, the first bounce, if the first bounce is off screen, you just got to bring it down a little bit more so it's in frame. The second bounce, you could probably drop, right? So that if this is the first bounce height, then the second one's like that, and then the third one could be like that, just so you have a little bit more control over the height in frame, okay? Yeah.
So fix height and fix squash. All right.
Yeah.
And the timing.
Yes. Okay. Ivan, pardon me. Boom, boom. That's looking okay. Minor little skid, right? So I could just see it just digs into the ground. I would just shift this over just a little bit to the right. Here, I think it'd be nice to see the stripes actually rotate just a little bit so it feels like it's still spinning just slightly. And over here, if you look at this, we kind of go up and then over. So I'm wondering if this position is in the right spot. If we look at that and we're on the ground, do we need to push that position a bit over to the right just slightly? Okay. Minor stuff. All right. Hopefully that's everybody. Anyone else missed?
Someone wants.
I just submitted. This is Troy.
Yep, there's Choi and there's Sophia. They're asking if you can check them again.
Okay. Yeah, better. I think bit of a strobe here. I think this just feels a bit like a straight line. So just tracking that arc, look at your contact position and then pick a point up here, right? And try and get that to feel just a little bit less linear. Yeah, that's working okay. Choi, better. Yeah, nice work.